When a punch is being thrown, there are typically a couple of different body movements that you'll often see. One of them is a kind of a whipping movement of the hip. Looks kind of like this. See? And what's going on at this moment is that the movement of the hip right here is used to throw the punch out. But once the punch is in motion, the body retracts and locks into posture and stance. And the idea, the theory, is that you generate your force here, and then what you need to do is you need to create a stable structure so that the shock back upon impact is now backed up by something solid. That's the theory. It doesn't actually work that way. If I'm doing this motion of the hip, you know, whip hip, right, where I fire the hip and then go like this, what that will look like is this. See? So you can see my body. My hip whips out. I have this nice whipping motion, and then there's the impact. But you're not seeing much happening. By the way, in a tournament competition, the use of whip hip actually makes your punch snap. Because what tends to happen is, as you do this, your fist goes out, your body comes back and straightens out your arm, creating a satisfying sound in your gi, which judges love. But there's no power there. There's no expression of energy there. Now, the second theory, this is the one that I actually do, is the idea that at the moment of impact, you want your body moving into the target. So that actually means that instead of throwing my hip here at the beginning of the technique, I don't throw my hip till the end. I throw my hip at the end, which is where the power point is. Now, in other words, I just wait. I just want my body to correspond to the impact, not to be the start. It's not about creating a snappy technique. I've taught this for years. I mean, years, 30 years. And I would always get funny looks from people, like, that's not how I learned it. And then one day I got a phone call from some folks who were students of Kanazawa Sensei, the great Shotokan master. And they said, Kanazawa taught it the same way you did. And I guess that meant it was legitimate because, you know, it had the seal of approval from a Japanese master. But it's just physics. If your body is moving away at the point of contact, you're not going to get any penetration and no energy goes in. So you need to have your body moving in the direction of the punch at the moment of impact. And so one of the key ways to do that is just wait until the end. Don't be in a hurry to throw the hip out. But there is another way in which people try to generate this same outcome. I see this in certain styles of Okinawan martial arts. Maybe they'll be in a position like this in the kata. They'll pull their hand back here, and then you'll see a movement where the hip will throw, rock back, and throw again in a kind of a movement. I can't do it well because I don't train that movement. And I don't train that movement for a fairly simple reason. And that reason is, if I'm here, I have to pull my hand back to my hip. Why am I pulling my hand back to my hip? If I'm just pulling my hand back to my hip because I want to punch, that seems kind of dumb to me, right? So, I mean, if we're guarded up and my hands are here because I've somehow engaged him, and then I want to punch him, why would I do this first? Wouldn't I just hit him from there? I mean, that would make the most sense. So the only reason I would bring my hand back to my hip is if it was doing something. Like, I don't know, maybe I was here because, you know, I'm blocking. Maybe what happened is he guarded up. I came in, I was checking his lead. He throws a punch. Now I've checked both hands. See how I look like I'm exactly in a move from a kata. And then, so here I am here. Now, maybe I grab and pull this back to my hip. But you'll notice what happened when I did that. I couldn't help it. The minute I'm pulling, I'm not just going to pull here with my arm. I have to pull with my body. You see what this does? It completely breaks his structure. I'm now, his hand is pinned to his body. My hand is up against his face. And now, see, my hip is on a 45-degree angle. Boom. There's my punch. So from my point of view, the idea that I'm going to do this without moving my hip, that does not make any sense. And then I'm going to do this throw hip, rewind, throw hip forward motion in order to make sure that the energy of the body moving forward corresponds to the impact of the punch. That seems unnecessary to me. I understand why people are what they're trying to get at, and I recognize the physical skill required to pull that off, but the assumption is wrong. See, the assumption when people do that is that they're here and they're this close, and now they have to somehow generate a force from here, so they're doing that, as opposed to here, which is a much stronger and more realistic position to be in. And now when I punch, boom, I just drive my hip forward. My hip's already turned. There's one last technique that I see talked about in some styles, both in Japanese systems, I've seen this, and some Chinese systems, and it's the idea of a wave that goes through the body. It's a variation on this motion, this whip hip motion, but it travels like a wave, so the idea is here. See, so you whip the hip, but the shoulder stays back. Here, see? It's difficult for me to do some of these movements to demonstrate them because I don't actually train these. I train the way that makes sense to me, but this is a very, very common one. So I'm kind of hurling myself, starting from my hip this way. That's stronger than the preceding one. You can tell that, but it's still really uncomfortable, and it's so much easier just to go. And so much more effective when the body just goes boom this way. When the body and the hand and the hip all together collide with the impacting surface, where there's no separation between those two. So here you've seen a handful of common sort of hip motions in punching, just kind of clean, straight rotation, this sort of whipping of the hip motion, and a sort of hurling of the body motion this way. And you also have an idea of the ones that I favor and why I favor them. But just understand this, different styles approach it differently. If it's what works for you, then that's fine. I do the ones that work for me. I guess for me, that's what martial arts is really about. It's not about me trying to do what someone else thinks is the right way to do it, but me doing the stuff that over the years I found is the right stuff for me. I'm Chris Thomas. These are some reflections from the master class. Thanks for watching. Now go train.